In the darkest nights, we find our light, battered souls, but we won't lose sight. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, we stand tall. United forever. Strength and courage will overcome. Oh, surviving together, victorious, never, never alone. Hand in hand, we'll face the unknown.
We see you, we hear you, and we believe you. Hey everyone, how you doing? You've landed at Surviving Together, a safe space for trauma survivors to connect and build community on their healing journey, as well as providing trauma-related education for all. I am so excited to have you all here today. I know that we're going to have more people trickling in as the live notification gets out. Although some people told me their live notifications weren't working, and it seems like YouTube's just messing up again. So I don't know what to tell you about that. Check your bell, make sure it's, on that all for notification. And if you're still not getting it, unsubscribe and then resubscribe. Sometimes that helps and that works. But we have got such a great show for you guys tonight. We had a little bit of a schedule change. So Deborah Lee is going to be coming on here in a few minutes, and she is a trauma-informed coach who is going to talk to us about trauma and soma exercises. Those are body-based exercises to help cope with our trauma, and she's going to go through some and demonstrate them, and it should just be excellent. I'm really looking forward to it. Just to kind of let you know, Saturday's show's a little bit up in the air in terms of my topic. But then next Wednesday, hang on a second. I got to pull up my schedule because I don't want to get this wrong. So then, next Wednesday on the 21st, we're going to have Shindig, and he's going to be talking about male trauma and addiction recovery. And then on the 24th, Saturday the 24th, so our 3 p.m. show, we are going to have a guest, Chris. I am so excited. I just locked him in today, and he was a witness to a mass shooting. He was involved in it, and, actually on the ground as the shooter was going, and he had a lot of trauma, PTSD to recovery. So we're going to hear all about his healing journey and the company the nonprofit that he started afterwards, and how he's been able to really change directions in his life and, full force into the mental health advocacy area. And then the next Wednesday after that, Sammy Yarborough is going to be on from After the Bars, and he is going to be talking about his PTSD from his years in prison and kind of what he learned from that, because he didn't realize until after he got out and, was starting to live on the outside, how much trauma he really had that he had packed away from those years. So it's just going to be a great month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. So I've been trying to bring you guys people and their experiences from all different aspects of trauma, and just to show you really how similar we are. We talk about it all the time, but hearing these stories from people and hearing that they've gone through almost the same things that you have, even though your trauma was different, it kind of puts it into perspective that we are really all in the same boat, right? And it just makes this community so strong. I want to do a quick call out here to everyone who is here. Tommy Stiggs is dropping by saying hi. Thank you so much for giving us a piece of your time tonight. Crystal is here. Thank you. Thank you. I hope everything is wonderful up where you are. Carmel, thank you for coming over here. Definitely going to need you to be dropping some links tonight. Let's see. Who else do we have? Co-Train is here. How are you, Co-Train? How is New York? It's beautiful here. I'll tell you what. I don't know if you're getting our rain from yesterday, but we have just had a beautiful day. Indigo, how are you? I am so glad you are here. I think Lord Kissfreak is on Kim's channel tomorrow, my other's keeper. I think that's what he said. Yes, I am talking about Walking Tall Project. Yes, I am so glad that you've heard of it. Yes. So Chris will be with us from that, and we'll be talking all about his experience and how he recovered and, still his recovery process. So it's going to be that will be an awesome show. And it's my bestie's birthday on the 24th too, and my dad's birthday the next day. So lots of things to celebrate. And Body Illusion is here. Hi. I'm so glad that you could join us. Well, I know people will trickle in, more people will trickle in after in a while. So, but I don't want to leave Deborah sitting backstage any longer. So I am going to bring her up and introduce her to you. Whoops, wrong one. That's going to be later. How are you, Deborah? Welcome.
I'm well. Thank you for having me, Mark. Very excited to be here today.
Yes, we've been talking about this all month. We've been so excited to talk more about trauma and learn from you, and especially getting into these soma exercises, which I know have the research, the science behind it has just proven the effectiveness of body-based techniques.
And yeah, I'm really excited to share that too. And
awesome.
It's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about the brain and how it's affected by trauma. We're going to talk about the nervous system, how it's connected to the brain. We're going to talk about the mind-body connection and how you can tap into that for greater self-awareness, emotional healing, and processing of trauma as well. So, and these are all going to be techniques that you can just do it at home. Like, you don't have to go see a therapist. You don't have to go on a trip to some remote island. Like, you can just do it in your bedroom.
That's the beauty of it. You can do it wherever you are. I mean, in your car, wherever you happen to need it, right? Because we never know when something's going to trigger us. And, we could be out in the grocery store, we could be on a walk somewhere. So that's wonderful. Well, why don't you just introduce yourself? I mean, I've got your bio and everything, but it's so much easier to hear it just from you. Introduce yourself a little bit and tell us kind of how you got involved with trauma-based therapy.
Yeah, sure. So my story is not that different from the story of many other women out there who have been involved with intimate partner violence. So I came out of an abusive relationship of 10 years in 2021. And I had to leave that relationship because I realized that if I stayed on, I could get killed. And it was that realization and the peeling away of layers of denial over time that brought me into awareness of my trauma, because as you mentioned, we get used to it. Like, a lot of these things become normalized. Our memory shifts and functions in a way so that we remember the good things, right? That's what keeps us in that relationship that is so toxic for us. But then over time, that diminishes our identity, our worth. And so my journey into reclaiming my worth and identity after emerging from a relationship like that and dealing with, the aftermath, right? And dealing with the fallout of it, because people thought, they thought whatever they thought, and they didn't understand some of the dynamics, and I didn't often get the support that I needed, even in that space. So who could I rely on? I mean, yes, there were some people that walked alongside me, but I had to be my best friend, essentially.
We have to advocate for ourselves.
Yeah, I had to advocate for myself. I had to learn how to reparent myself, take care of myself, be aware of, my own triggers. And, like, for example, when I was going through the divorce, every affidavit that came in was like another, like, shell shock. So you just have to learn to, like, weather through these things. And how do you do it? if you don't have the tools for it. And so
Exactly.
I didn't know about the mind body connection, and I didn't really know much about trauma back then. I
Mhm.
barely knew anything. Like I started doing research on abuse. I started doing research on gaslighting, and then a friend introduced to me this book called "The Body Keeps the Score" by Bessel van der Kolk.
Love it. Seminal,
Yeah,
seminal piece of work. Absolutely.
seminal piece of work. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list for at least like 7 or 8 years, for
Long
good
time.
reasons too, because it has so much resonance, you know. And when people read it, they see themselves in it. And when I read it, it just made everything clicked for me. And
Mhm.
I realized, hey, there's so much stuff that I didn't know about. Like I have
Mhm.
it for therapy, but a lot of therapy is not trauma informed. Therefore, I didn't get the insight that this book is giving me. And then from there, I went on to do EMDR to process, because I had post traumatic stress
Mhm.
as well. And I would constantly get overwhelmed. Taking public transport would be really difficult because I would get, just in a state like just overwhelmed. So
Mhm.
all of these things were affecting me. But, reading the book, I found out about EMDR and how
Mhm.
effective it is, and how you don't even have to, like, go into any detail about what you actually went through, because it
Yeah.
can be traumatizing. So then I did that, and it really was very effective. So I went on to get my certification with the Trauma Research Foundation, which is led by Bessel van der Kolk. It's in Brookline. And then I also went on to get certified in somatic EMDR with the Embody Lab, which is also based in New York City. And now I'm pursuing my clinical psych degree at Columbia University. And my area of interest is in empathetic AI, but also like learning how continuing to research more deeply into empathetic processes. Like, how do you tap into that to
Mhm.
give people the support that they need? And so that because trauma essentially is not being seen, heard, or felt.
Yeah.
So parts of yourself gets hidden, or like you masked, and so unlearning all of those ways that we coped, which I'll go
Mhm.
into more detail later when I talk about trauma responses, is an essential component of healing and awareness. So I'm really excited to launch
Awesome.
into today's sharing. Yeah.
So, a two-part question. The first is, did you start with any therapy that was not trauma informed? And then can you tell us a little bit about what the difference is between going to somebody who doesn't have that background, to why it's so important for trauma survivors to find somebody who has that trauma informed education?
Yeah, so basically, trauma informed simply means that you're looking at people through the lens of the fact that they might have gone through something like trauma, something traumatic, and then people's understanding of trauma too, depending on their level of training or the exposure to trauma, it differs. Because in the DSM-5, PTSD is listed as this thing, but the reality is that there's also CPTSD is not listed in the DSM-5, which is like what people here use, the ICD-11, which is what people in Europe use.
Right, and it is listed there.
It is listed, and CPTSD in itself is called complex post-traumatic stress disorder because it's a lot more complicated.
Mhm.
So if you've been harmed in a relationship where there should have been trust and there should have been security, it affects it affects how you move about in the world later on. I mean, it
Mhm.
and for good reasons. You don't want to sort of repeat the same mistake, but then it also has an impact on your relationship. So being able to process that, it requires a different set of tools than something like PTSD. And so
Mhm.
people who are trauma informed usually often incorporate a body-based approach, because what happens too is that when you've gone through a lot of trauma, your brain changes. So things like your amygdala, which is like the emotional processing center of your brain, it's like the smoke alarm of your brain. Like when things are not right, it goes off. And so your amygdala is highly sensitized, it's often enlarged, physically enlarged. Like brain studies have shown this. And so you can imagine like what it's like to be living constantly on hyper alert, hyper arousal. And then little things might set you off, or like you might just always walk around just not feeling safe,
Mhm.
right? So these are all things that have an impact on you, have an impact on your stress levels, have an impact on every aspect of yourself, and even on your identity as well. So being able to work with someone who understands this about you and doesn't sort of, I mean, it's actually really interesting that so many people who are working with survivors are not trauma informed. So when they look at like, for example, like domestic violence survivors, they will say things like, yeah, I don't understand why they overreacted over there.
Right.
Right.
But
Because
just
they
regular
don't,
cognitive behavioral therapy, it just doesn't work for a lot of
yeah.
trauma survivors.
And understanding triggers, like
Mm,
why is this person reacting this way? It's linked to the past. It's linked to something that happened before that they haven't been able to process. And Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, talks about that. Like a lot
mhm,
of people have gone through immense childhood trauma, sometimes really, really grave violence done against them.
mhm,
They are able to, they're high functioning, they go through life, do all sorts of things, and then something happens to them that kind of triggers them, and then they start to unravel, right?
mhm.
And then they go through the psychiatric care system, they get labeled, and then they live under that label, which is not
Right.
very empowering, and then the medication also changes the body chemistry, their brain chemistry. So sometimes they get completely disconnected from
Mhm.
themselves. I'm not saying that medication is always bad. I'm just saying that misdiagnosis happens a lot when actually it's rooted in trauma. And unless you
You're
do have the
depressed. Let's give you a medication for it. Let's talk
that's
about what's going on in your life. And, like for me, it was always what was going on in the present when what I needed to deal with was that stuff in
yeah,
the past.
because unconsciously you are creating, it's called repetition compulsion, right? Freud talks about it, like where you're just trying to master the past unconsciously. You're trying to
Right.
recreate it in present day situation to master it. And that's natural, it's part of adaptation, it's part of growth. But then awareness of your own triggers, awareness of what's happening within you and your body, because your body's always communicating with you, will give you the tools you need to break those patterns in present day so that you don't end up stuck in repeating cycles that you don't want to repeat.
Right. That is just so great. Jimena, welcome. I'm so glad you joined us today. We're just starting with Deborah present. She's got a slideshow for you guys too, so you've got some graphics. You don't just have to look at us. Isn't that amazing? Like every occasionally, I'll be able to throw up a video or a slide or whatever, but usually it's just me up here talking and going yeah 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 yeah. So go ahead and present your slideshow, and we'll kind of slide off to the side
Sure.
here.
All
And
right. Okay, welcome everybody. Today, I'm just gonna launch into this. So, it's called Somatic Paths to Healing. It's a body-based approach to healing from trauma. My name is Deborah, and I have founded a company called Creaturae, and it's a trauma-informed care consulting and coaching practice. So, in my own journey, which I shared about earlier, one of the things that I came into awareness of is healing starts with awareness and learning to be kind to yourself. Essentially, this means changing the relationship with yourself. So, a lot of trauma survivors learn to white knuckle their way through life. Like, if it's not working, try harder.
yeah,
And unfortunately, it's a very painful way of living if that's consistently how you're going to do it. I mean, sure, there are times we have to be strong and muscle through, and it's part of growth. But if you're constantly in this state, it's not a good place to be in, and your relationship with yourself is likely not that great.
such high stress.
Exactly. So before we go into all the material today, I thought I would create a bit of space for us, and we're just going to do parts meditation. So it's a way for us. The benefits to parts work is that you start to understand yourself. So when you've gone through trauma, sometimes you dissociate from core aspects of who you are. But this meditation will give us the opportunity to reconnect with some of these parts that maybe we've disowned. So it works towards integration, harmonizing conflicting inner dynamics. So if you ever watched Inside Out, for example, those are some of the scenarios that you can identify when you want to address these conflicting inner dynamics. And also helps us to develop skills for managing our emotions effectively because we acknowledge all of them, not
Mhm.
just the positive ones. And then there's also conflict reduction, where you give yourself that room to acknowledge these emotions that maybe you're so used to just tamping down to cope.
Mm.
And it has a lot of nervous system benefits because it promotes relaxation, reduces stress, and supports emotional well being. So, okay, I'm going to just take a minute and everybody can just, wherever you are, sit comfortably, stand, just be in a state of relaxation. We can start with a few breaths in through your nose, hold and out through your mouth, in through your nose, hold and out through your mouth, in through your nose, hold and out through your mouth. So, as you sit in your space, just get comfortable wherever you are and focus your attention internally for a moment. And as you focus your attention internally, I'm going to ask you to focus on any thoughts, feelings, or physical sensations that you notice inside. Again, thoughts, feelings, or physical sensations. As you notice those, I'm going to see if you can focus your attention on those and see if it's possible to extend some curiosity towards those thoughts, feelings, and sensations and notice if one of those rises to the surface. Is it louder or stronger, or does it want more attention? And if it does, see if you can get curious about what it's holding for you. This may be something familiar, or it may be something new. But whatever it is, see if you can get curious about it and about what it wants to share with you. And you may notice that other thoughts, feelings, or sensations are kind of jumping in to distract you. Or you may notice that you're not noticing anything at all. Whatever is coming out, just get curious about it. Whatever you're learning here, see if it's possible to extend some gratitude towards it, towards what's coming up, even if it's negative. Notice how those thoughts, feelings, or sensations respond to that gratitude once that feels complete. Again, try to thank whatever showed up. Maybe you're going to make the intention to follow up at a later time. And when you're ready, come back to the room. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to ask you all to notice, like just to take note for yourself, the difference that you're feeling in your body. So, is there a difference in the energy surrounding you right now? And you were able to turn your focus attention internally. This makes a difference because different parts of the brain get activated differently when we focus our attention internally versus when we are externally focused. So I think most of us here are like very, very externally focused most of the time. So just even creating that space to turn our attention inward, it activates different parts of the brain and it can actually shift our focus, attention, and energy levels. So this is one of the hallmarks of IFS, which is what a trauma-informed practitioner sometimes incorporates, called internal family systems. And you're actually activating and focusing on the parts of the brain that have been literally affected by trauma. So this is an exercise that you can use anytime, and there will be more exercises down the road, but this is an exercise that you can use for yourself.
I
Okay.
definitely was humming, and it's not totally gone, but it's definitely calmer. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Just a few minutes.
Yeah, that's the power of it, is that you don't have to invest like so much time and energy into it. Like a lot of people get overwhelmed. They're like, I don't have time for therapy. I don't have time for this. But like it's
Right.
literally like just taking a couple minutes just to tune in. And that actually can really change your energy levels because as mentioned, you know, it's activating those parts of the brain that have been affected by trauma.
Mhm.
And as we move in further into this presentation for the day, would like everybody here to just consider what brought you here today. Perhaps it's curiosity. Some of you here have gone through really traumatic things, as Mark has shared earlier. Some of your stories even involve gun violence, mass shootings, things that are very overwhelming. And on this point, just create that space for yourself to acknowledge why you're here and the reason for it, and to hold that space. We're gonna look a little bit more at what trauma is. So we all know that PTSD is defined in DSM-5 as a completely overwhelming incident, and it usually separates your past and present by this incident. So for example, it could be like a car crash. It could be like you know, an assault, for example, right? So it's a one-time event that has had such an impact on your life that you're forever changed by it, and it can have um, residual effects such as intrusive thoughts, nightmares, difficulty just functioning on a day-to-day level, being in a state of hyperarousal, inability to focus, because your brain is affected. Aside from PTSD, there is also CPTSD. As mentioned earlier, it's listed in the ICD-11, but not
Do you want
in.
to put this on the screen?
Sorry?
Do you want to put this on the screen? This
Yeah.
slide?
Yeah, is it on the screen? Oh, it's not on the screen. Okay. Is
Yes,
it on the
now.
screen right now? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, perfect. So CPTSD is it's actually longer term than PTSD, and it happens within relationship. That's why it's called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because it is complex. The complexity is that you're in a relationship where you're supposed to experience safety, but you experience the opposite. So it has residual effects on you, and it can show up in all sorts of ways, including similar to PTSD. You might have intrusive thoughts, you might have, you know, difficulty trusting people, you might have triggers. And we'll go into more of these trauma responses later on, but just to a very simple rule of thumb for CPTSD is that it happened within relationship. And so there's also what you call vicarious trauma or secondary trauma. So a lot of first responders, like if you are a nurse or if you're a firefighter or if you're a lawyer even, you might be exposed to a lot of this because you're surrounded by people who have gone through a lot of trauma. And when you keep hearing all of these day in, day out, it can also affect you, even though you may not be directly experiencing it yourself. Grief is also its own form of trauma, in the sense that you are experiencing a loss and it takes your brain time to adjust to the loss as well. When you lose someone that you love deeply, that is a form of trauma. Okay, so we're just going to take a couple moments here. If you guys would like to just drop into the chat, like what each of these scenarios portrays a certain type of trauma. And so based off of the slide earlier, you can just drop into the chat what you think this scenario is, where the husband has lost his wife through a sudden accident. So, yeah,
I'm
I'm
going to
not
say
sure.
PTSD.
Yeah, it's PTSD. That's definitely it, because it's grief and PTSD at the same time, right? Because you're grieving the loss of a loved one, and it was a very traumatic accident as well. Okay, so the next one is a child experiencing his parents in constant conflict, and there's emotional neglect. It affects his sense of identity. They're going through divorce. So what kind of trauma would this be?
Right. And, for so many of us, even if there wasn't a divorce, just the constant conflict, like for me, my parents are still together, but the constant
Yeah,
conflict, the emotional neglect, the
yeah.
lack of support that was there. And I will tell you, the light bulb went off for me when I was watching a video and somebody talked about CPTSD for the first time. I went, holy crap,
Mm,
that is me.
right, exactly. Yeah, you were going through emotional neglect at that time. And I remember too. And when I was a kid, I thought, I thought, well, it got to a point where I think divorce would be better, so that there would be less conflict. So
Yeah.
that is the reality that a lot of people find themselves in, and that is a form of CPTSD because it happens within relationship. It affects your view of relationships. It affects your relationship with yourself and with others. So the next scenario we have here is a scenario of workplace harassment where it's boss versus employee, and you go in every day and you constantly feel like you're being put down, belittled, overlooked, invalidated, and this happens over a period of time. For some people, they don't have the luxury of quitting. They stay on, and then they start to doubt their sense of self. They start to doubt their identity. What kind of trauma is this?
And this is something we haven't covered yet, but also with the, whether it's, say regular harassment or sexual harassment,
Mhm.
a lot of times, people have a zero tolerance policy, but when something is brought up, it's like, oh, they were just joking around. Can't you take a joke? And you start doubting yourself. You're like, well,
Yeah.
wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't feel bad about that.
Yeah.
I think this, it's a tricky thing, but it's within a relationship as well. So, I'd say CPTSD because you
Yeah.
go
And
over
that's
that
exactly right.
timeline.
Yeah, and what you described earlier is as well is called gaslighting, where your feelings are invalidated, where they tell you that you're making a big deal out of nothing, and they're constantly dismissing your thoughts, your feelings, and your sense of reality. So then you're being gaslit over time, and it can really cause you to doubt yourself, your identity,
Mhm.
and your sense of worth as well.
Mhm.
So the next one is actually similar in some way because there's abuse as well. So it's a wife at home with a husband and experiencing intimate partner violence. So what kind of trauma would this be?
Yeah, I mean, this is so many of us, know this from some sort of level. I mean, this is your situation, right, Deborah? And I
Yeah.
was in an alcoholic marriage for 8 years.
Hmm.
So, you know, just going from childhood CPTSD to then, as an adult experiencing it later on in life. I really, honestly, I've been out of that relationship for 12, 13 years now. And I don't think I really realized how much that I was affected by it
Yeah.
until I
Yeah.
started really looking at it from this sort of lens that, this is a CPTSD as well. So I just kind of had that compounded.
Right. And it becomes so normalized. That's the thing. Unless you're exposed to information and education around it, it's very, very easy to just imagine or feel like, well, this is normal.
Mhm.
And I realized that for myself too. I didn't even realize that a lot of the things that I'd gone through were not normal. And the way that I was looking at violence was like, oh, he lost control. But
Mhm.
actually violence, physical violence is about escalating control. So if a social worker hadn't told me that, I wouldn't have
Mhm.
understood that. I thought, oh, he lost violence, my fault. I made him angry.
Exactly. What did I do wrong in
Yeah,
that
so
situation?
that's its own gaslighting as well, right? So you learn to take responsibility for things that are not yours to take responsibility for. So that's kind of like once you're liberated from that, once you have the right framework to look from it, then you can start the work of healing. Because it's a lot easier to step out of it when you have the tools and the framework for understanding what you're going through, rather than just going with automatic responses that you learned as a child.
I was told so often in that marriage that just don't irritate me, don't get on me about the drinking or whatever, and everything will be fine. And I don't get angry. And he's right. He didn't, and so I took that on as my responsibility, and that it was my fault because I was poking the bear, right? And so it was like if I had
Yeah.
just been quiet, or if I had just been, not getting on him, just let him do his thing, things would have been copacetic, right?
Yeah, and that's
And
coercive control itself, right? Like he's telling you don't poke the bear, but he's doing things that are unacceptable, essentially, right?
right.
So it's like there's accountability in marriage, and he's basically saying there should be no accountability. So that is
Yeah.
it's its own form of control over you, where your voice becomes silenced over time. Your true feelings about a situation becomes invalidated,
Hmm.
and you're not allowed to speak your truth. Your truth, your experience, that's yours. That's uniquely yours. And in an equal relationship where there's no coercive control, it would matter to your partner. And they may not necessarily be able to handle it perfectly all the time, but there would still be a space and respect for it.
Right.
Yeah. So coming back to this, and I'm so happy that Mark, you're out of it now. Happy
Yeah.
for both of us,
It
actually.
it took yeah, it took my son was going to be entering kindergarten, and basically, I moved all the time when I was young, and I wanted him to be able to have a stable environment where he was going to start school. That's the school district he was going to end with. And I was going to have to move cities if I was going to get divorced. So
Right.
that was the impetus. It was like, okay, it's now or never, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my son had graduated last year from high school, and he is still best friends with the kid he met in kindergarten. So
Wow. Yeah. Sometimes it's like somebody else, like the impulse to like the impetus to leave is driven by love for your own child as well.
yeah.
Yeah. So okay, we'll go over these real quick. Just over here, the child experiencing school bullying, that's CPTSD. The teenager, experiencing loss of limb with car accident, that's PTSD. The therapist who is in relationship with a client and then, like basically, experience hearing about traumatic material 8 hours a day, that is vicarious trauma. So you would
Right.
it can actually change how you look at life a lot. Like if you're not like doing self-care, you're not practicing self-care, and you're just constantly exposed to this,
Mhm.
it has its own like form of trauma to it as well. So
Yeah.
it's important for like providers for or first responders to take care of themselves. Yeah. So okay, how does trauma affect your brain? Let's look into it. So this is your brain on trauma, very simplified version, but essentially affects four main regions, and then there will be another region I'll talk about later that's not listed here. But anyways, it affects your prefrontal cortex. As many of you might know, it's the executive functioning part of your brain. It's like the CEO of your brain. So basically, if your CEO of your brain is like going out and like just not in the office, can you imagine what your office is going to be like? Is your company going to work? No, it's not, because there's no one steering the wheel, right? So it makes it hard for survivors to regulate fear and emotions as rational thinking is. Now we will go to from there to the overstimulated amygdala. As mentioned earlier, it's like the smoke alarm of your brain. So it results in survivors feeling a constant threat of danger. And the more hyperactive the amygdala is, the more signs of hyperarousal there will be. So before I went through EMDR, I was very afraid to leave the home because
Yeah.
I was constantly overstimulated. Like
Mhm.
anything would just kind of put me into a state of overwhelm. And at that time, I was still on antidepressants for 10 years in marriage. And then I actually had to get off antidepressants because of the overstimulation. And I realized like if I take antidepressants when I'm in this state, it's gonna like push me over the edge. Like I'm gonna be overstimulated. So I actually got off antidepressants. And so even though my body was healing itself, coming out of such a toxic relationship, my body automatically started healing. But then I was also, experiencing the downstream effects of PTSD, and that was due to an overstimulated amygdala, which thankfully through EMDR was able to kind of, rewire my brain and,
Mm.
and my nervous system as well.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. So, okay, another aspect that is affected through trauma is the shrinking of your hippocampus, which is the part of your brain that helps to store memory. So it's to do with memory storage and retrieval. It's like a little seahorse shaped part of your brain. And basically it makes people on trauma like live as if the past is happening in the present. So you might see something or like smell something, and then you immediately get pulled back into the past. Like, for example, you might be, just
Mhm.
class or something, or like at work, and then something like comes up, a thought comes up, and then suddenly you're pulled back completely, and then you lose track of what's happening in front of you, right? People might be like, hey, are you there? Or
Right.
and so that's the issue, is because your hippocampus has not been able to process some of these memories and store them away, to file them away. And EMDR, is able to help your hippocampus to function as it should. So we'll dive
Mhm.
more into that later. And
Smell
another,
of lavender still gets me.
sorry,
The smell of lavender, it's still an instant trigger,
right?
even all these years and all the work that I've done. It's just one of those things that, yeah, still working with.
Wow. Well, even with EMDR, like that still
I
triggers.
have not done EMDR myself, so
Okay.
I'm super excited to even learn more about it.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. Like, yeah, I mean, because lavender is such a beautiful smell. Like, I would love for you to be able to smell it without being triggered.
Yeah.
I love the smell of lavender. So, yeah, highly recommend. So, under active Broca's area, which is the area to do with speech production. So this is why they call it speechless horror. uh, Bessel van der Kolk talks about trauma, and he uses the word speechless horror. And that is because sometimes when you've gone through such horrible things, it's like you don't even have the language for it,
Mhm.
right? And society itself makes it almost like taboo to speak of such things.
Right.
So there's kind of a certain level of social conditioning, but actually it's also physiological. Is your brain and your neurology of your brain has actually shifted to the point that it's hard for you to even articulate what you've been through. And sometimes you lose words even for normal things, right?
Mhm.
Your day to day as well. So these are all some of the aspects of how your brain can be affected by trauma. And then there's also another part of your brain, which is like the midline structure of your brain from here all the way back. And Bessel van der Kolk calls it the mohawk of the brain. And this part of the brain is activated when you're in a state of like daydreaming. Like, let's say you're just walking, you're not thinking about anything, you're just letting your thoughts drift. This part of the brain is activated. And this part of the brain, when it's activated, it helps you to tune into yourself. Like, for example, am I hungry? Oh, like, what do I need to do now? So it's to do with your sense of self. Okay, so it's a very essential part of your self identity. Now, if you have been through immense trauma, right, like let's say childhood trauma, this part of the brain is often not activated, or it's not as active as it can be or should be. So that means you don't actually have a super strong sense of self. So when you don't have a super strong sense of self, it can lead to all sorts of issues like codependency, or like, prioritizing others over yourself all the time, or like not knowing what to do, like just not having a sense of internal anchor or internal grounding within yourself. So and it can also affect your ability to kind of see beyond, like to plan for the future, to like imagine yourself in various situations where you want to go. Like, how do you steer your ship if you don't have a map for it?
Right.
So exactly. So these are some of the ways that your brain can be affected by trauma. But the good news is that our brains are plastic. We didn't know this very much in the 80s, even that our brains were plastic.
Right.
Right? There's neuroplasticity, but this is a really good piece of news, that we can rewire our brains, and not just that, we can rewire our brains through our bodies. Right? So how do we do this?
One thing about the mohawk, right? And am
Mhm.
I correct in um I recently learned that when you activate that, it actually allows the thoughts from the left and the right side of the brain, the neuro,
Yeah. Yeah, it allows
the
the integration.
synapses, right?
Yeah.
It allows them to be able to move back and
Yeah,
forth and
it
connect,
allows yeah, it
and you
allows
can't
yeah.
do that if this isn't activated.
So what happens a lot of times when you've gone through trauma, you learn to think in a very almost like linear way to cope, right? Or for some people, and then for some people they might be just like constantly like right braining everything, and then there's very little organization. So it can cause a split in that sense, when usually you're supposed to have both parts working well together. It's called
Yeah.
integration.
Mhm.
And so and sleep does this too. Sleep helps us to integrate like things that happen to us. Like sometimes you can go through a really horrible day, then you have a good sleep, and the next day is like fresh start, right? You're not carrying all that stuff. It's because your brain did a lot of processing when you were sleeping.
Mhm.
So that state of like daydreaming state, where the mohawk of self-awareness, it is a state where you are able to sort of like, yeah, like as you mentioned, like these parts of the brain that are like sort of not working together, they become integrated, like those synapses are firing, those neural pathways are being activated. And so EMDR started that way, actually.
Oh, really?
Francine Shapiro, who created it, was in she was this was in the 90s, I believe. She was walking through Central Park, and she was ruminating on something that wasn't very nice that happened to her. And then at the end of the walk, she said, "Hey, why do I feel so much better?" And then she said, "Oh, you know what? I was looking around like quite a lot as I walked. It could be my eye movement." And then from that theory, she went and tested it out on friends, family, and then she brought it to universities. They did a lot of evidence-based testing around it, and it became validated. And so now it's widely used in trauma. So that's why, like, activating, it's called the default mode network. So this part of the brain, like where the mohawk brain is, it activates your default mode network. Default mode means you're not busy doing anything, you're just chilling. And what happens when you're in that default state, right? So usually in a default state, if you haven't been through massive trauma, you are attuned to yourself. But if you have been through massive trauma, you're not as attuned to yourself. So this the long and short of it is that reclaiming that relationship to yourself is an essential part of the healing process. And it's also based in neuroplasticity.
Mhm.
Okay, so the autonomic nervous system is the foundation of our lived experiences. This is a quote from Deb Dana, who is also another somatic practitioner, and she works a lot with different clients, and on a body-based level. And she talks about the autonomic nervous system. So I'm going to go more into the mind-body connection, and in order to do that, I have to use some lingo. So bear with me. The autonomic nervous system. Okay, so I'm just going to give a very quick breakdown of the many parts of our nervous system. So there's the central peripheral nervous system. As you all know here, the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. So this part receives, interprets, integrates, and processes information from the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system. It coordinates and controls voluntary body activities and is responsible for decision making and memory, essential parts of our identity. Now we turn to the peripheral nervous system, which extends throughout the entire body, and it connects the central nervous system to the rest of the body, as well as transmitting messages from our environment through sensory and motor signals, right? So this is a big source of information, right, that we often overlook, but it's actually really, really essential. And within the peripheral nervous system, we have the somatic as well as the autonomic system. Now, I'll start with the autonomic and then I'll come back to the somatic. So the autonomic nervous system, it's coined by the term auto, meaning that it's automatic, right? So that means we can't control it. It controls involuntary functions such as the heartbeat and digestion, and in and of itself breaks down into two parts, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. A very simple way of thinking about the sympathetic versus parasympathetic is that of a car. So the sympathetic nervous system is like the flight system. So think about it as stepping on your accelerator to gear yourself up for action. Okay, whereas the parasympathetic is the rest and digest system, and you can think about it as your brake pedal. So instead of speeding up, you slow down by pressing on your brakes. So your autonomic system governs all of this, your gas pedal or your brake pad. And it is all involuntary. And when you've gone through trauma, your system is dysregulated. Okay, it's almost as if there's a rock on your gas pedal all the time. And the
Mhm.
rock, is sometimes you're trying to pull the rock away, but the rock is like stuck on that pedal. Okay, so how do you regulate that then? Because it's outside of your realm of control, right? Like the autonomic nervous system. Good news is we have what you call the somatic system, where it's your body. See my hands here? This is all somatic. It's like soma, body, right? So it controls voluntary muscle movements. And so from here is where you can start to regulate a dysregulated nervous system. It connects back to your autonomic nervous system. Okay, so we talked about the fight flight accelerator. So when you're in that state of hyperarousal, your pupils are dilated, your saliva is inhibited, your airways dilate, your heart rate increases, your stomach inhibits digestion, liver releases glucose, intestines inhibit digestion, kidneys release adrenaline, your bladder relaxes, reproductive system decreases blood flow. Now, what does it look like when your brakes are on? Okay, pupils constrict, there's salivation, airways constrict, your heart rate slows, your stomach digests, intestines digest, bladder constricts, reproductive system increases blood flow. So in people who are not dysregulated, there's a balance, right? There's for dealing with the demands of the day, your accelerator's on. Then at the end of the night, when you come back home, you can start to put the brake pad on and come back to baseline. But for survivors, oftentimes this is baseline and you're often here.
Mm-hmm.
You're so used to living here that when you come back here, you feel like very, very uncomfortable and you want to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So the story of how you get back to here is by recalibrating your nervous system to the point where this is your norm again. This is not your norm, right?
Mm-hmm.
That also it takes some degree of mindfulness around that to get yourself back to that state. Okay, so when I talk about incorporating mindfulness into your life, I also talk about the window of tolerance. So when you've
Mm-hmm.
gone through immense trauma, your window of tolerance sometimes can be, in some cases, very, very narrow. So, like, for example, situations that most people are just not reactive to, you might just not be able to tolerate because you're just like, I'm here. Like immediately, if this is your level of arousal, going up and down, you might hop out of that window of tolerance because your fluctuations are much greater. So you might end up being in a state of hyper arousal. So you're just very reactive, you might be in fight or flight, emotional distress and all that. And then if you're in a state of hyper arousal for a super long time, okay, what happens is that eventually you might end up dissociating, you might end up shutting down and getting to a state of what you call hypoarousal, defined by that gray area. So in this state, you're depressed, lethargic, numb, unmotivated. Oftentimes, you may not feel anything. You're just kind of like, whatever, like checked
Yeah.
out, right? And then you're just going through the motions. You show every day, but you're just, yeah, okay. And you just feel like completely disconnected from life itself. And that's when you start to question, like, what am I doing? Why am I here? And so these are all things that people go through,
I was there for a long time when I got my divorce out of my alcoholic relationship. I also,
Mhm.
10 days later, I lost my job. And so I had a complete mental break. And,
Mhm.
I really spent the next 10 years putting myself back together. But I spent, before I knew what to call it, I spent a
Mhm.
long time in
Wow.
hypoarousal, just kind of, doing the bare minimum of what needed to get done to pay the bills and keep the kid fed and make sure he was clothed type of thing. And
Yeah.
you're just going through the motions of the day and realize you're just existing. You're not living, you're just existing, right?
It's all that you can do sometimes just to
Yeah.
survive. I remember that very well. Like
Mhm.
I remember telling my friend, like I was going through trying to make a decision about what to do next, after being assaulted. I'm like, should I stay on? And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I have to do all these things. Like I just kept thinking, like, because I cope a lot by just doing more, like as a survivor thing, where you
Mhm.
like just start filling out your notepad and like just trying to check off more stuff. It's like a coping mechanism. And then it's like I said, Rachel, I gotta do all these things. I gotta do all this. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, but I don't know. I don't feel like," and she's like, Deborah, why don't sometimes all you can do is just survive.
Yeah.
Okay? Just make it through today.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
when she said that, I felt so relieved. Like I can just survive. It's okay to just survive. And
Yeah.
it's like sometimes that's all you can do, right? Like when life throws certain things at you, like, oh, you have a certain hand of cards. You just have to play your hand. And it's not always gonna be, you know, you know, butterflies and flowers. Sometimes
Right.
it's just gonna be getting that bill paid or like
Mhm.
making it through the day. right? And so we need to give ourselves credit for that, even going through that, because it is a process. Healing is a process. And for some people, the process is rushed, and that actually is negative, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't pay off in the long term. You want to make sure that you spend the requisite time to process whatever happened to you and get the right resources, the right people to speak into your life, the right support, mental health support, the right tools, right? So these are all things that is a form of self-care as well. And
Mhm.
sometimes it just takes time. I know many people who might have lost somebody, through, really traumatic things, and they don't process it. Sometimes they don't talk about it with anybody
Mhm.
for 10 years because
Yep.
they everybody has their own way of coping, and sometimes they're not even exposed to the knowledge around, hey, there are these tools that you can use. There's these things
Right.
you can do. And sometimes people are just so busy like trying to like live life or pay the bill, get your job. So they don't often have that space to find out what resources there are to process the trauma, right?
When somebody you says you're so used to being there, it's like you don't even realize there is another place to be. Like,
Yeah,
that there's that other level. That
yeah,
it does. It's become such your norm
yeah,
that your norm you could go even higher, right? And some people be like,
yeah,
"What the heck?" But yeah, to come back to that level it can take time, and sometimes, right, we go up and then we go down, and we go through it, and sometimes we might go to hypo, we might be in hyper, and we talk all the
yeah.
time here that healing is not linear.
It's not. But what happens is that when you do start to heal and like peel back those layers of trauma and like process it and everything with a therapist, a coach, or like, whatever you end up using, the awareness will actually increase your window of tolerance. And through some of the somatic exercises that we have later on, you can do this, like practice it. And what it does is actually it increases your window of tolerance so that the things that used to distress you don't distress you as much anymore.
Right.
And it's not through white knuckling. I just want to make that very clear because sometimes people
Right.
think it's about more grit, more determination, more push through, more, you know, and that's not how it works. It's more about acknowledging. It gives you the ability to experience your emotions within your body. So a lot of trauma survivors, when they first start feeling things in their bodies, because they spend their whole lives dissociated, right? They
Mhm.
spend their childhood maybe like in emotional neglect. So they learn how to disregard the emotions. So your body is actually where you experience emotions, but then you learn to disconnect from all these feelings of anxiety or whatever,
Mhm.
and you live up here. You're so used to living up here, and like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. Why? What's wrong? Nothing. You just normalize all of this stuff. Normalize.
Right.
Then when you start to really get into a space where you start experiencing the emotions within your body, you can feel like physically you're drowning, or
It's very uncomfortable.
yeah, you could feel like you're having a panic. You could be, you could actually experience even a panic attack, and you don't want to get to
Right.
the point because, you want to be able to pendulate. Pendulate meaning go into that a little bit, experience a bit, and then pull back so that you don't overwhelm your nervous system. So
Mhm.
that's also something that a trauma therapist would be able to help you to do, where you are able to titrate the experience of processing the trauma so that it's not all just at once, which is,
Right.
it can be very re-traumatizing to process your trauma like all in one big shot. So
Mhm.
you don't want to do that. And so an experienced trauma therapist would be able to help you to pendulate as well. So yeah, so speaking of trauma therapy, there are top-down approaches, which is CBT, which everybody knows, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a lot about reframing what has happened to you. And as mentioned, because a lot of trauma survivors, their brain is in a different realm from other people who may not have gone through a lot of trauma. So it may be hard to use CBT as the main tool for helping you process
Mhm.
it. Instead, what can be helpful is bottom-up approaches. So bottom-up meaning yoga, meaning EMDR, meaning somatics, sensory motor psychotherapy. So all of these are like body based, so it brings you in touch with your actual sensations within your body, so your mind is not in overload all the time. You're not always like overthinking, but you're actually just experiencing, feeling, because that is in essence what you need to do. You need to allow your body to feel without any judgment. Just experience things, and then the feeling will go through your body like a wave, right? It's like waves have the highs and the lows, so it goes up and down. And as you're used And when you start allowing yourself to notice these feelings going through you without any judgment, without any story attached, right? That's when you become more emotionally agile. That's when your window of tolerance widens, where like even if you're experiencing setbacks or like difficulties, you're not going to default back to your old trauma responses. And I'm going to talk about trauma responses in a bit. So as mentioned, like earlier, your question, Mark, there's a difference between a trauma-informed approach and a non-trauma-informed approach. So a trauma-informed approach recognizes the presence of trauma and its impact. It creates a safe and supportive environment with the requisite tools that mentioned earlier. Like sometimes it's a body-based approach, and it also there's pendulation where there's awareness. Like, hey, we don't want to unpack all of this right now. We might touch it on it, but pull back a little bit, depending. There's also safety and grounding, where sometimes in EMDR, they will definitely implant within you a place that you can visualize that is a safe place, right? So then when you are feeling the overwhelm, you can bring to mind that image of a safe place and then experience that sense of safety flood your body again. So then you can come back to a baseline level. And it prioritizes empathy and understanding, and it really encourages empowerment and collaboration and self-agency. So it doesn't put the practitioner as the expert on you. You are the
Right.
expert on you, right? You are the expert. We're just helping you to peel back those layers and give you the tools so that you can navigate that space and get back into the driver's seat again. A non-trauma informed approach may overlook the effects of trauma, and oftentimes it focuses on symptoms like
Sorry about
oh, no worries. It might just be kind of very symptom focused rather than going into root causes. And then, as mentioned earlier, sometimes if the practitioner is not trauma informed, they can ask you questions to the point that you end up telling your whole story, and then you don't feel supported, and then you walk away completely dissociated from that 1 hour meeting. And that's because they don't understand that they shouldn't be opening certain things without equipping you ahead of time. So it lacks. Oftentimes, it can.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It can lack safety and empathy considerations, especially if you've been through an abusive relationship. A lot of people who are not trained in a trauma-informed approach, and they don't understand the nuances of abuse, sometimes the things they say can come off as really judgmental. So you want to be careful around that. I would say that if you come out of an intimate partner violence relationship, definitely work with somebody who understands and has been trained in abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how does EMDR work? So some of you might have seen, like maybe Good Will Hunting or like any of these shows where there was some kind of psychotherapy, and then you would see them moving their fingers, and that's not too far. That's actually pretty much what is done in EMDR. But nowadays they have electrical devices that they can, so that you don't even have to use your hand anymore. Like that's basically what you call bilateral stimulation. So bilateral stimulation meaning alternately stimulating the left and the right side of the brain, as you mentioned earlier, Mark. Like that, when you're walking and you're in a default mode network daydreaming state, like you're activating both parts of the brain and helping them to communicate with each other. So this is essentially what EMDR does, right? It's called eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and it's a therapy that helps process and heal trauma using guided movements to reduce emotional distress. So basically, just a very quick breakdown of how it works. You would ask the client to recall a distressing memory while focusing on the moving stimulus, which could be the hand or it could be electrical devices that are attached. And you would is it not being shared, the screen? I'm just double checking. Okay, great. Yeah, so your eye movements will help your brain to process the memory differently, reducing its emotional charge or changing the way that memory is configured in your brain. So the memory becomes less distressing, allowing for adaptive thinking. So you get to reframe what happened to you so that it's not like, so let's say if you were assaulted, you might feel completely helpless and overwhelmed, and you might just have that feeling of like you're powerless. But when you reframe it, that negative introject or belief about yourself gets reframed to like, that's in the past, and I have my power back. I am strong. I'm a survivor. I'm a thriver. So these are ways of changing that story about what happened to you. So EMDR in essence, helps the brain digest trauma similarly to how REM sleep processes memories. The combination of dual awareness, as we talked about, the eye movement while you're processing the distressing memory, it's a form of dual awareness because you're acknowledging and processing what happened in the past. This is telling your brain, hey, we are here right now. So that dual processing is a tool that helps your brain, that informs your brain, hey, you can store this, tells your hippocampus, you can store this away now. This happened in the past. So it creates that mechanism where it's like telling your hippocampus to store these memories that are so traumatic, that's still trying, your brain's still trying to make sense of it. That's why it keeps replaying. So it's creating a platform for your hippocampus to store those memories safely away so that your brain knows that's in the past. So the combination of dual awareness and what is called adaptive information processing, where the trauma memories are stored dysfunctionally, as mentioned, they're floating around your brain. So if you imagine your study, right? So if you have a study, your brain is a study, but then it has all these like pieces of paper strewn all over. Those are like your memories strewn all over the place. So your brain is like, how are you going to get any work done in your study if you have all these pieces of paper strewn over, right? Like crumpled balls of paper, like just
Been there, done that.
yeah, so it's not the best environment for this, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
it's not a great environment for focusing if you have all that stuff there. So imagine if you were to take all those balls of paper, unfold them, just straighten them out, right? So that they are all, pieces of paper that you can actually read. Then you start organizing them and then filing them away in your filing cabinet. Now you can focus in your own room. There's a lot more headspace, right? There's a lot more headspace to focus on positive things that you want to do instead of being stuck in the past. And then, those memories are still there, but they're integrated. They're where they belong within the filing cabinets, right? So that there's a whole narrative and arc to your life, and it's not overtaken by stuff that has happened in the past. You can be more present in today and really enjoy the present for what it is. So EMDR helps reintegrate these memories so that they can be processed in a healthier, adaptive way. And so this is called adaptive information processing. So in essence, this is how EMDR works.
We did have a question, and I'm not sure if you know the answer to this,
Mm.
but do you know the statistics at all as to what kind of percentage the EMDR will work for people? I
Yeah,
know that
it's very high. I think it's at least like 70%, if I'm not wrong.
I heard like 80, 85. So it's,
Yeah. So it
it's up
depends on
there.
the different populations. They have used, like, EMDR is very, very effective for all sorts of psychopathologies.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've even used it on autistic kids, and the rate of recovery is so high. In fact, the story behind why I went for EMDR is because in his book, Bessel van der Kolk actually saw his PhD students doing it, and he said, "What are you doing?" And they were like,
Wow.
"Oh, EMDR." He's like, "What's this? That's crazy. Don't do it." Like he just kind of he can be quite dismissive sometimes. So
Yeah.
he'll say, "That's crazy. Don't do it. Don't do this. Like, it's crazy." You know what? The students were all like, "Okay," and then they went ahead and did it anyways. And then all of their clients like just recovered. So the rate of recovery was so high that he couldn't dismiss it anymore. Then he himself went to learn it, and then he started practicing it. And then one day a PhD student came up to him, and she had a boatload of trauma, and she didn't want to talk about it. And she said, "I just want you to practice it on me, but I don't want to talk about it." And he was a bit upset at first because he's so used to hearing all these stories, right? Everybody pouring their guts out to him. Then he spoke to his coworker, and his coworker said, "Dude, Bessel, if you want to hear all these gory stories, just go to a bar and buy someone a drink." Right? And sometimes they get so
Yeah.
caught up in that world that, I must know all that stuff and know like
Right. Talk therapy. You got to know every detail in
Yeah,
order
you
to
know what?
help. And
No, that's their own private world. That's up to them. Like, your job is to help them to get better. So when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I have to do EMDR. And so for me, it was effective. It was effective to the point that I wasn't afraid of going out anymore. I could, go on a train, I could take public transport, I could do whatever. I noticed it happened over time, right? Like your window of tolerance widens, right? So there are things that happen through life. You also have to learn how to know what your limits are. So my tendency is to just push through, like white knuckle. So I would push. And your body can't take it. So like that awareness, that interoception, like being able to also understand and know your own limits, that's very important as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of the healing journey is also coming into awareness of like, hey, these are my limits, these are my boundaries. I'm
Boundaries.
going to draw them right here,
Yep.
right? And that's not always easy, because I'm going to go into trauma responses in a bit, and then we'll talk about that. Because we all learn to, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. We have,
I was just interested to know, for you with your healing journey, when you started EMDR, about like how long did you do it before you were noticing major differences?
yeah, and that's the beauty of it. I love, that's a great question, because sometimes people can go for a lifetime of therapy, right? And then, if it's helpful, it's helpful. But sometimes they feel like they're still stuck after going for a lifetime of therapy, and that's not a great place. But for me, like when I went there, I had a very specific targeted goal. And the goal in therapy is always very important. And if your therapist is not defining your goal for you, that's not a good thing. So I went there and I told her, look, I'm dealing with this. Like I it's hard for me to like go out. It's I'm just constantly in a state of hyper arousal. And so it took about 12 sessions, and it was an hour and a half each time.
Were you weekly?
Yeah, it was weekly, and it took about 12 sessions.
About 3 months.
Okay, I want to put in a caveat that, and I understand that not many people might be able to do this, for me at least, because I'm also highly sensitive. So I'm a highly sensitive person, meaning that this is a form of neurodivergence. So I process things at a much deeper level than other people. So it's the same thing that happened to other people may not affect them. Oh, I was wondering why you're standing up. Are you? So what are you like? Are you HSP, or like what are you?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, that's what I would be. But we have so much of our community is neurodiverse.
I'm
I
neurodiverse.
found this shirt and I was like, oh, I gotta own it. So.
Yeah, I
wore it
I'm an
today.
HSP. I found out many years ago, and then but I'm conditioned to not be an HSP in many ways, because I grew up in an environment, and so I had to sort of learn how to muscle through, right? So
Yeah.
it's working against my actual so coming back to realizing my own, myself, like my core, and working with that instead of trying to be in a different state all the time. That's important. So yeah, I mean, after a session, I would just go home, turn off my phone, and let that be the rest of the day. Like I would not be around people at all, because I would get triggered. Because you're actually still processing even after the hour and a half. You're still processing, you're still integrating. So being able to give yourself that space to process and integrate is so important outside of that hour that you have with your therapist. Okay, so coming back to this, we all learn adaptive ways of surviving through trauma. So for you, you might have learned, for example, for many of us, we all know fight, flight, and freeze, right? Fight is like anger outbursts. You become very controlling. You become a bit like bullying. You might even exhibit narcissistic, explosive behavior. You might be aggressive. Okay, so this is a fight response. Flight response is more, you become a workaholic. Okay, work defines your identity. You become overthinker. You don't do anything. You're constantly thinking before you do anything. It's hard to feel like you're in flow. You have experienced anxiety, panic, OCD. It's hard for you to stay still. You're a bit of a perfectionist, overly analytical. Okay, freeze is there's a lot of indecisiveness. You're stuck. You're dissociating. You're depressed, isolating, feeling numb. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the trauma responses that are less known, but all the more important. You guys need to know about it. Okay, so the fawn response is one of the least understood responses. So all of the previous responses, fight, flight, freeze, is mediated by your amygdala. Okay, it's very automatic, it's very visceral, it's to do with survival. And sometimes it gets you out of bad situations, and that's good. It's an adaptive tool, but it's just that if you're living as if you're constantly in danger when you're not, then that's not adaptive, because your body's under a lot of unnecessary stress. Now, with fawn, it's not mediated by your amygdala as much as it's mediated by your prefrontal cortex. You've learned, a very strategic way of coping. Strategic if this is your one-stop one trick pony, where you're constantly people pleasing, codependent, can't say no, lack of identity, you avoid conflict, you don't have any boundaries. And it often leads to resentment in relationships. It often leads to a sense of powerlessness. It can result in you losing your sense of identity, and there's a sense of self-erasure as well. And it can also make you feel like you have no worth outside of relationships. So that's actually quite sad, So that fawn response is very ingrained, and a lot of women actually develop that, and learning to overcome that fawn response is part of the healing process. Now, there's also two other responses that have been identified in more recent times by the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine. And that's the collapse and submit response, where you end up feeling hopeless. There's very low motivation. You end up submitting to others all the time. There's low self-esteem, lack of energy. You're overwhelmed. You have difficulty expressing emotions. And then there's also the attached cry for help, where there's a lot of attention seeking. There's self-harming behavior. You might end up like cutting yourself, or maybe even attempting suicide. You're seeking validation, and you have difficulty setting boundaries. You engage in risky behavior or impulsive action. So these are attached cry for help, because you're trying to bring, the only way that you feel safe is by attaching to people, right? And that can happen a lot of times because people feel so disempowered that they feel like they need other people to tell them that they're okay. And it's true. Sometimes you do. I mean, I'm not going to say like, it's wrong to do that. It's not. We're part of community, and safe relationships is where healing begins. But then when it becomes to a point where there's no self-regulation, then it becomes very disempowering, right? So we're going to look at some ways that you can self-regulate in a few. But here's a quick glance, quick look at where some of the familiar places where you might experience certain emotions. For example, if you constantly feel like this tightness in your throat, it could be that maybe you are not speaking up. You're losing your authentic voice, right? So then a headache could also be indicative of like you're feeling a loss of control. And then if you feel that gut-wrenching feeling, oftentimes it is fear that you're experiencing. And so there are all these parts of the body that will be communicating with you, like what your feelings are. So it's important for you to tune into it. Essentially, trauma is a loss of connection. So Peter Levine, who wrote the book Waking the Tiger, he's like a traumatologist as well,
Right.
and psychotherapist. And he says trauma is about loss of connection to ourselves, to our bodies, to our families, to others, to the world around us. This loss of connection is often hard to recognize because it doesn't happen all at once, right? It happens over time. Our choices become limited as we avoid certain feelings, people, situations, and places. And the result of this gradual constriction of freedom is the loss of vitality and potential for the fulfillment of our dreams. So, think about that. That's a form of self-erasure. Right? So healing from trauma is regaining your sense of self. And in this picture is what you see, where initially on the left-hand side, you see this gingerbread man is almost like your identity is just solely defined by yellow, which indicates trauma, right? And then there's not a lot of healthy attachment, self-respect, positive emotions. But once you start processing the trauma and putting it where it belongs, it takes up less space in your life. It's still a part of what you went through. It's still part of your story, no doubt, right? But then it doesn't define you. And you start to
Right.
have more positive, you start to have more positive emotions. You start to have healthier attachments, and there's more self-respect, right? And so and that happens over time. It's not something that you want to rush, but having the right tools, like going for EMDR therapy, or going for like, seeing a somatic practitioner, or like, just practicing some of these tools that I'll show you later, it's going to be so effective for you.
I've heard that upwards the latest studies that they have done on people with PTSD, because they haven't gotten into the CPTSD, but who are practicing yoga, it's like 85% of them are feeling incredible relief for it. So similar to EMDR. So I can only imagine if you're doing yoga and EMDR, but it's just the science is proving how effective these somatic exercises are.
Yes, and so the thing about these somatic exercises is that it's actually really quick as well and fast. Like for me, I tried yoga and I just never got into it. It never stuck. So I'm more of a like, I love playing tennis. I love, like cycling, like things that are very aerobic. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so that's just my constitution. This is who I am. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I really tried getting to yoga, but I just couldn't do it. Like I spent some time and then I was just like, okay, yeah, I get it, but it's not my cup. So somatic soma, these exercises are like, quick and dirty, and it's almost as if it's like your mind state can just change like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more you practice it over time, the easier it is to shift. It's like, for example, if you think of your mind like replaying those horror loops in your head, like you're on the horror channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're watching TV, you're watching The Ring, right? It's like The Ring on repeat.
Yeah.
So but as you practice with soma, it's almost like you have a switch. You can switch channels. So you don't want to tune into that channel, just press a button, move into Disneyland instead. And that's the beauty of it. And that's why I feel like it's so effective, because you can it doesn't mean you never experience negative emotions. It means that you can pendulate.
Right.
You have the control, you have the TV control. You want to come back to it and process it, go ahead. But you can also pull yourself out of it and tune into something else, give yourself a break, be kind to yourself, right? Because we're not meant to be processing all this heavy stuff day in, day out. We're actually meant to also
Yeah.
enjoy life.
Right. And you're going to be going into the types of soma exercises. And one of the things that we have stressed here is that, and like yoga didn't work for you, not all these techniques are going to work for everybody, because
No.
we're individual people with individual experiences at a different place on our healing journey. And even more, one technique that works for you one day may not work for you the next day, because maybe you're dealing with a different piece of your trauma. And
Exactly.
so you need to be able to switch it up. And that's why having all of these different tools in your toolbox is so helpful, because then you can reach for the one that does work that particular time.
And that's so true, that it's not like a one trick pony, as I mentioned earlier. You don't want to keep just going back to the same stuff. It's a process of healing, right? Healing is a process, and different times you might need different things as well. But it's always good to come back to baseline. And some of these things, like breath work, for example, like breath is so foundational
Mm-hmm.
to our sense of self and our sense of wholeness, right? So I find myself sometimes when I'm like in like my tunnel vision state, and I'm like, I really need to get this done. Like, I know my breath is like, I just even pay attention, and like it's so shallow,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like, even I, as a somatic practitioner, have to remind myself,
Right.
come back to this, Deborah. Come on, you got to practice what you preach,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so these are all things that it's easy for me to teach other people, but I need to also come back to it and do it myself, right? So okay, let's start with butterfly hug. Very easy. If everybody's ready for some easy somatic exercises, okay, let's loosen up a little bit. Okay, so put them together like your two thumbs, yeah, like intertwine them, and this is your little butterfly here, and you're gonna just rest this little butterfly on your collarbone right here. Yeah, there you go. And then you're just gonna like alternately tap left and right. And as you do, breathe in through your nose, hold and out through your mouth. Go at your own pace. And then you can repeat an affirmation to yourself internally, or you can verbalize it. It's up to you. But as you do your butterfly hug, just tap in that positive affirmation. Yeah. And just notice how your body feels even as you tap that in, that affirmation to yourself. Is there a shift in sensations within your body? What do you notice about your energy level even as you're doing this? Right? Okay, so this is something that you can do anytime, like even in the office, you can do that real quick.
The
And then,
tension in the back of my head, just like I could feel it like melting a little bit. It's,
wow, that's great.
yeah,
You see?
that's just
Something, yeah,
amazing.
something so small, like something so
Yeah.
little, right? So it's like it just shifts your mind state. That's what it is. So then, okay, now let's do arm rub. So arm rub, just stretch out your arm like that, and then just almost as if you're soothing Can you imagine, like, if you were talking to a friend, your friend was distressed, and then you just went to your friend and you start soothing that friend. Sometimes you pat them on the back, even, right? Like, so you can do this. It's like an arm rub, and you're just soothing yourself. It's okay. You're all right, right? And you do that to your other arm too. So you alternate it, just with that tenderness, that gentleness, that kindness that you would extend to a friend. Extend that same energy to yourself. And then this one is like one of my favorites, okay? This is totally like effective. And animals love this too. Like cows love this. So basically, like, take your right hand. Okay, not, I mean, cows can't do it, but like the idea.
Like, this is interesting. What are you doing now, Deborah?
No, I mean, I don't mean like, but the idea of containment, like containment makes you feel safe. Containment, like, so basically, it's take your right hand, put it underneath your left armpit, and then take your left hand and put it over your right shoulder, and give yourself a hug, like just a soft hug. So this slows down your nervous system. It regulates it. It just allows your limbic system to come back to stasis, and just allow those sensations that come up as you hug yourself. Just allow yourself to experience it fully. As you hug yourself, the same way you would hug a friend, right? It's very comforting. So that's a way that you can,
It's like the idea behind the weighted blankets.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. So animals love this. Like cows love it too. So cows they have a contraption for cows to kind of enclose them. And then once the cows are enclosed, they start to calm down. Their nervous system starts to come back to baseline. So
That's
it's actually,
interesting.
the Temple Grandin found out about that. And she herself, Temple Grandin was autistic. And she actually went and she saw that contraption being used on cows, and she went and did it on herself. And she found herself being self-regulated through that contraption that was being used on cows.
Oh my gosh, that's
It's
so interesting.
Fascinating, right?
Yeah, it's like the founder of EMDR, just like putting the connection that I was looking left and right. So let's try and like recreate this or transfer this to a clinical setting,
Yes. And it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science.
Just the thought to do it.
It's basically dual awareness, because you're processing this thing that happened in the past, but you're still connected to the present because of your eyes. This is there's a physiological basis for the processing itself, dual awareness. So it's not rocket science. It's just that she was able to make the connection and then validate it in a clinical setting. So that's the beauty of it. We have so many tools that nature gave to us for healing that doesn't involve changing the brain chemistry by popping more pills. Right? So I think that we should definitely make use of these tools. Okay, so box breathing. So I'm gonna just start. Okay, you guys can just look at my finger if that's helpful. Box breathing is used in the military as well for high pressure situations to help people come back to their bodies when they're experiencing a lot of stress. So you can follow my finger if it's helpful. So we're just going to take a breath in for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 4. Breathe out for a count of 4, releasing any tension in the body. Hold for a count of 4. In for a count of 4. Hold. Breathe out, releasing any tension in your body. Hold. Breathe in for a count of 4. Through your nose. Hold. Breathe out. Just release any tension. Hold. And one last time. In through your nose. Hold for a count of 4. Breathe out. Hold for a count of 4.
I love breathing exercises.
Yeah,
whether
right?
it's the box breathing or the breathing in, but then breathing out for longer than you do.
Yeah, there's so many breathing exercises. You can just Google it, actually. Like anyone, you can just Google it. And I think you're talking about the 4-7-8 breathing. And I'm going to do one more breathing exercise. It's called the singing breath. So it's a technique that is designed to provide a rapid and effective approach to easing tension and stress By integrating deep breath with robust sighs, individuals can effectively unwind and dispel accumulated stress. It is advisable to adjust the pace and intensity of the technique to suit your personal comfort levels. So let's just go ahead and do this real quick. So inhale deeply through your nose, focusing on lifting your lungs with air. And then you allow your stomach to move outward as your diaphragm expands. Exhale slowly and audibly through your mouth. Releasing the air with a sighing sound. So imagine letting go of any tension or stress with each sigh and concentrate on the sensation of the breath filling your lungs and the release of air during the audible sigh. So we're just going to do this a couple more times. In through your nose, let your stomach expand and your diaphragm fill out. And then release through your mouth with an audible sigh. And imagine all the stress flowing out of that sigh. 2 more times. In through your nose, expand. And then breathe out through your mouth. Pushing the air through your mouth. And one last time. In through your nose, expand. Out through your mouth. And pushing the air through with that sigh, releasing all tension and stress. Okay, so that's the singing breath. And we're going to end today's session with body tapping. And this one is a little bit similar to EMDR because it is a way that you can also process memories that are not that happy or like things that happen to you that you just want to process it. Okay, so this is body tapping is also known as tapping therapy or emotional freedom technique, and it involves tapping specific body points with fingertips to release emotional stress, restore energy balance, and enhance overall well-being. It can address issues like stress, anxiety, pain, cravings, and negative emotions. Okay, so now everybody here can just think of an issue that's bothering you. Okay, so think of an issue. This can be any issue. For example, it could be something you're feeling really anxious about or stressed or sad about. Okay, so now on a scale of 1 to 10, measure how that issue makes you feel. Okay, so 0 being no distress, 0 distress, 10 being the greatest amount of distress. So where are you on that scale? Now create a statement that describes your issue. Okay, so maybe it could be, I feel powerless, right? Or I just feel empty, something like that. Create a statement that describes your issue, followed by a statement of self-acceptance. So self-acceptance could be, I'm allowed to make mistakes and I'm learning and growing. So any statement that comes up for you that denotes or conveys self-acceptance. Now, as you hold on to this statement of self-acceptance, tap repeatedly on the edge of your palm right here. Okay, tap below your little finger. Yeah, just keep tapping. And while you tap, and you can tap the other hand too, say your statement out loud 3 times. Okay, so just say it out loud, or you can say it internally, but just say it. Like, or when you're on your own, you can say it too. I am loved, I am accepted, I am whole. So things like that, just tap it. And then tap the rest of the points on your body. These are acupressure points. Okay, so this would include the side of your head, okay, right? Your eyebrows, the side of your eye, under the nose, on your chin, your collarbone, under the arm, right here. And just keep saying that phrase out loud even as you do all this. Tap the top of your head. And as you tap on each point, acknowledge, it's important to acknowledge the negative emotion related to the traumatic memory. For example, this fear, this pain, this memory. And after acknowledging, affirm a positive statement. For example, I choose to release this fear. I am in control of my healing, and or I am safe and secure. I am safe and secure. So this is very similar in some ways to EMDR, but you can just do it at home on your own. And so with that, I've come to the end of the session.
That
And
was great. And Crystal had a comment, and she said
Mhm.
that the arm rubbing was anxiety inducing for her. And that just
Okay.
goes back to how it's so important then to have all of these different tools, because it's not going to work for everybody. So
Yeah, yeah,
hopefully one of them might work for you, Crystal. Maybe you found something new that you didn't know about before.
yeah. So definitely like arm rubbing might, and even breath work can sometimes induce like more anxiety for certain people. I've heard that from some people I work with as well. So
Mhm.
it's important to give yourself space first of all. So if you do it all these things and then you're in a rush, then it can also induce anxiety as well. So
Mm.
some of these exercises, you just need space and time to like work through it. And if the arm rub doesn't work for you, there are many other exercises that can work for you as well. So I would encourage you, Crystal, just go ahead and explore what's out there that could be effective. Sometimes even just taking a hot bath can be very effective for kind of bringing you back to that grounded state. And so before I go off, thank you so much again, Mark, for having me. And it's been such a pleasure
Thank you
sharing
for
our
doing this.
story.
This has been absolutely fabulous. It's kind of put so many lives that we've done kind of all into one. And it just was a great presentation, Deborah. Thank you so
Oh
much for
yeah, no, and I
imparting
really
your
appreciate,
knowledge with us.
yeah, I really appreciate creating the space, creating the safety for people to share what they've been through, to talk openly. And so I think it's really important that the final part of healing is actually helping other people to heal. And that's been my journey. But like having the connection with other people to heal, like we all heal in relationship, right? And so that's a very big part of the healing process, is being able to heal in relationship. And so the fact that you're doing this and creating a space for people and talking about trauma and welcoming people with all the disparate stories around it, like I think that that's amazing. And I have also created other platforms. So if people want to scan, they can go ahead. But I have a podcast. It's called All Things Uncomfortable, for people to talk about things related to trauma and other things that maybe people don't want to talk about as much.
Right.
I've recently also started talking about AI and mental health. And so there are all these other topics that go there. And I also have a Medium platform where I I share about my somatic insights as well. I'm on LinkedIn. So if people just scan this, they can have access to me. They can follow me there as well. And I believe that, Mark, you're going to send out like a link for Google reviews in case anybody wants to drop like a review on this session. And I really appreciate any feedback, and positive feedback as well would be really helpful. So thank you so much, everybody, for participating today. I really had a wonderful time, and I wish I could have seen you all in person, but this is what we have right now, and so
Right. Yeah, this is our
yeah,
platform. And for some people it's more comfortable, because even when they get on camera, they're just their voice, and they don't want to have the visual.
yeah,
But
yeah,
thank you so much. Yes, your LinkedIn information, the link to the Google reviews, to your company. I will put that all in the video description. I'm not going to be able to get to it tonight, but I will certainly be able to do it tomorrow. And
yeah.
if you can also just give us a regular link to your podcast,
Sure,
that
yeah, I'll
would
send
be,
it through. Yeah, I'll give
yep,
you a regular
include
link.
that. And so, guys, by tomorrow morning, you'll have it all in the video
Oh wow,
description,
tomorrow
and
morning.
you'll be
Okay,
able
I better
to.
send it through. All right. Well, you know what, Mark? It was just wonderful. I had a great time. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much
much. We
again.
did as well, and you're welcome
Yeah,
back anytime, whether it's to
thank
be
you.
on the camera like this or just to join us in the chat. So
Yeah,
we're
no,
on
I
every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and every Saturday at 3 p.m. So
yeah.
um,
Okay.
definitely. Thank you so much.
All
Well, I
right.
know you've got a meet to go
Yeah,
to
I
as
have
well, so I'll
another meeting soon, so I
get
have
you
to
out
go.
of here, and then I'll
Yeah,
close
and
up.
I know you have to
So
go too. So enjoy your evening, and have a good one, and we'll be in touch.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right.
Bye. All right, guys. Well, Rick, Misha, Kim, I know there's a bunch of people kind of came in a little bit later who I was trying to type my hellos. Echo, thank you for joining us. Um, hopefully you guys got something out of that. I know I certainly did. For as much of research as I've done, the way she put things together, I just found it was a great 1 hour synopsis of kind of how trauma goes and how it does in our body. If the soma practices are interesting to you, certainly check out her podcast. She has had many podcasts where she's talked about soma practices with other soma practitioners and kind of what they do. And everyone's got their thing that they like and works for them. And as we were talking, these tools, that's just what they are. They're tools, right? And sometimes a hammer gets the job done. Sometimes you need a screwdriver. Sometimes you need a Phillips screwdriver or a flathead, or it varies. And from person to person and from incident to incident. The other thing I wanted to encourage people is, if you do like the soma exercises, practice them when you're feeling good. Practice them when you think about it. Because the more we practice them, the more we're getting used to them, the easier it is to use, the easier it is to employ and remember sometimes to employ when we're feeling not so good. Crystal, yeah, we've had this, I think we've mentioned this before. You and I think have spoken about this before, that somatic is not for you. And, again, it's everybody's experience is different. And so you have to find what works for you, whether that is, when she was talking about the top down versus the bottom up ways of healing, of going through therapy. Top down seems to work for you. That is great. Doesn't work for everybody. Didn't work for me. Soma-based works much better for me. But that's me. That's because my experiences that I went through and the types of trauma that I have had. So don't be afraid to totally explore everything that is in the toolbox. And there's so much more out there than we've, even discussed. If there's anything out there that you have found that's worked for you, or that you found interesting and you want to learn more about, please let me know. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. Let me know what you thought about the having the guests on. We're going to have a few more guests this month as well. You guys like this? Do you like having guests on? Do you like me talking? Do you like having a mix? Let me know, because this is your space. I just hold it. And I want to bring you guys what you want and what you need. So thank you so much for being here with me today. I have thoroughly enjoyed not only this talk, but the year. Oh my God, we're coming almost up on a year and a half of the channel. We're 6 weeks away from a year and a half. That blows my mind. Misha shows that her and Jen Marie are going live in a couple hours, and she's dropped the link down there. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it. I had a friend fly in at the last minute from DC, so I am going to meet up right after this, actually. So I'll be busy tonight, but I will catch your replay, Misha. Grateful. Thanks for being here. I'm so glad that you're here listening. Hopefully you got something out of it. Kim, welcome. I'm so glad that you were here. Please, if you haven't, hit the like button and subscribe, and hit the all bell for notifications, because otherwise it just goes to personal and then you're not going to get the notifications. I know YouTube has had some problems lately. I don't know why with notifications. If you continue to have problems, like I said, unsubscribe, resubscribe. Sometimes that helps. We are creeping up on our watch hour goal. I think we've got like 250 hours left, something like that. So if you guys want to play some videos overnight or whatever and try and help us get to that 3,000 hour mark, that would be awesome. And yeah, so Saturday at 3 is our next. I don't have a topic planned at this point. It's just going to be me, and I'm going to figure something out to talk about. So, but please join me. I'll get a thumbnail up here in the next day or so, so you'll have something coming up. Hope all is well where you are. I know it's going to get a little chilly here coming up. We're going to have highs in like the 50s and 60s, which is really a bummer since it's been like 70, 75 for the last few days. I'm like, I'm so ready for summer. I'm not wanting to go back down again, but that's Michigan. So again, thank you all for being here. I want to remind you that you are worthy, you are valuable, and you are loved for who you are, just the way you are. So hugs and love from me. Mwah. Surviving together, never alone. Stick around for the outro. Our own Jimena made it. It's a little long, but it's a wonderful song. We'll see you guys Saturday. Bye for now.
Through the fire, through the rain, we have walked through endless pain, but we stand, we rise again, stronger now, we break the chain, surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. Every tear, every scar tells the story of who we are. Not just survivors, but warriors too. With love as our armor, we see this through. We see you, we hear you, and we believe in you. Surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. We see